Hello lovely people. Today I'm going to show you how to tune a fully passive system. So for those who watch my videos, probably you know that I have an Alpine Status 3-way in the front, mid bass in the kicks, mids in the dash, and tweeters in the pillars. And at the moment I'm running them out of this little DSP amplifier Alpine. So it has 4 amplifier channels, and I was running mids and tweets only. However, now I thought like I want a full system with mid bass and subwoofer because I miss my bass. However, I don't want to install any amplifiers because I want to test them first, and I will need to rebuild everything. Even this, I'll have to rebuild everything, so I don't want to put anything in because I will need to basically rip it out anyway. So I decided to do, like, my brain sometimes doesn't work, and it's like, how can I do this? How can I run all speakers from this little thing? And then I thought, I have passive crossovers that I haven't tested. I did a video on them, so if you want to watch, you can watch a video about them, but I haven't tested them, I haven't measured them, and they are exactly for that purpose. So today we're gonna go proper old school, and we're gonna start with the very basics. So we're gonna start with a head unit, an amplifier, and passive crossovers. So this is a DSP amplifier. However, for this, I think what we're gonna do like a few different videos, and I'm gonna step up every video a bit up and up. So we're gonna start with fully passive, then we're gonna start with like head unit EQ. So okay, let's start from the beginning. So first video, this one is gonna be fully passive. This DSP amplifier is gonna act only as a source, like a 4-volt source into the amplifier. I'm not going to use any DSP features on it. No crossovers, no EQ, no time alignment, nothing. If I'm going to treat this as a head unit, and basically the only thing that head units have is level control, so you can pan left or right, you can adjust the balance. And some head units, like most head units, even this one that I don't use, have tone control. So it has like a knob for bass, which is like +10, -10, mid-range +10, -10, and treble +10, -10. So these are like the adjustment that all the head units have, like all basic head units. I might actually replace this Alpine DSP with a Nakamichi, because if you watch the Nakamichi review, which was in another video, that Nakamichi has in the app those actual 3 tone controls, bass, mid, and treble, but this one doesn't. So I might replace it because it's just literally swap this one and put the RCAs, because it's exactly the same, like the plug is exactly the same, so I won't have to do any work. So I might swap it, and this is going to act only as my source. So I'm going to treat this as a head unit, because this example is going to be for people that just starting in the very beginning, when they just buy a 2-way or 3-way passive set and they just have one amplifier, because like we're always concentrating on 10-channel DSP, fully active, 3-4 different amplifiers and everything, but we always forget that not everybody has those systems. Not everybody can afford 3 or 4 amplifiers, and a lot of people are running passives from a head unit, and they have only a sub amplifier, and we forget about those people. And this is the video is going to be exactly for those people, how to tune a fully passive system. So let me explain what we have here. This is going to be only for signal, as I mentioned. I have 4 RCAs coming into this amplifier. So the only thing that I did is just I amplified the passive 3-way. I could run them from the DSP amp, but I just decided because the amplifier is going to be there, it's not a monoblock, it's a 4-channel, I'm going to amplify those. So what I have here is I have one side on one channel, so the other side on the other channel, and then I have the subwoofer, which is in the central console, because I took this out. So I have a subwoofer in the central console, and that one is running from channel 3 and 4 bridged. So this amplifier supplies about 110 watts, and this passive set is rated 100 watts per side, so it's like a perfect match. And the sub channel, if you bridge it into 4 ohms, that's like 350 watts or something. of 320 watts, and that sub is rated 350 watts. So basically it's a perfect match, yeah? And as I mentioned, if you're just starting, you might have these passives running from the head unit, and you might have a small monoblock for the subwoofer. So first deal of business is I connected everything works, everything plays, all three, and now we need to identify what kind of adjustments do we have. So basically, how can we tune? Because tuning a system is not setting the gains. Tuning the system is doing something to improve the actual frequency response and the performance of the system. So with passives, we are losing the ability to control literally anything. The only thing that you can control with passives is what is in the actual passive crossover. So if you watch this video about these passives have a few little tweaks that you can do. So what we can do is, number one, we can adjust the slope for the woofer. So we can choose either 6 dB, either 12 dB with this tab. If I remove it, it's 6 dB. If I put it back, it's 12 dB slope. The other thing we can change is the mid-level, which is this tab. So if I remove this, the mid-range level, I'm not sure if it increases or decreases, but I'm gonna test that. And then we have the tweeter level, which is here. We can choose like plus 3 dB, 0, and minus 3 dB. So basically we can play with tweeter and mid-range level. We can play with woofer slope, and we can play with this amplifier. So this amplifier is just a typical for full range, and we have just gain. We can set the crossovers. So remember, if we're going to treat this as a regular head unit, it's not going to have any crossovers. It's going to have a full range signal going into the amplifier. So we will be setting the crossovers with the actual amplifier. So on the front channel, we can set only the crossover between 50 and 400. And then on the rear channel, which is for the subwoofer, we can change the crossover, and we can do bass EQ. So basically it's a bass boost. So these are the things that we can play with. The other thing that we can play with, as I mentioned, in the head unit is the level, left and right, and maybe some tone controls. Yeah, so because every head unit has it. So what I'm gonna do now is everything is playing. I'm gonna set this down to 0. So I'm gonna run it like flat, like basically bypass everything, just like raw. And then I will need to identify with measurements how everything measures. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna disconnect the sub, and I'm gonna leave only the fronts. And then with like left and right, I can measure one side. So I'm gonna disconnect everything here. I'm gonna leave only the left side. I'm gonna measure the left side performance. Then I'm gonna measure the right side performance, how it measures. And then I'm gonna measure the sub separately. And I'm gonna measure first, I'm gonna measure on full, so bypassing everything, bypassing the crossovers. And then I'm gonna take another measurement with the minimum crossover. So minimum crossovers on the full range, which is on the front, is gonna be, it says 50 hertz. So with 50 hertz crossover, because I'm not sure if this is a 12 dB or 24 dB crossover, I'm gonna see that. And the subwoofer, I'm gonna measure with crossover all the way up to 200 hertz. And then I'm gonna check what the bass boost does, where it actually boosts, because I might need it, I might not need it. So first I'm gonna take a lot of raw measurements, and then I'm gonna take the measurements with the front end with this tab, without this tab, with this tab, without this tab, with all three of these different positions, just to see how it changes the actual frequency response. And when we're gonna have all the data, then we will be able to adjust something to make it somehow better and see how better it is. And after this, we're going to jump into our EW. I'm going to show you all the measurements, and at the very end, when we're going to tune everything, I'm going to listen to it and I'm going to tell you my impressions. Yeah, so let me take my laptop, microphone, and start measuring. Okay, let's do this. So I have loads, quite a lot of measurements, 31. Yeah, so let's start from the beginning. This is my floor noise. I just checked before the actual measurement. And basically, the second measurement that I took is the whole frequency response with so you can see the floor noise is way below. So this is a frequency response with just everything as it is by default. So all the tabs in the passive crossovers in there, all the gains on the amplifier set to 0, and crossovers, no crossovers at all. So basically everything is overlapping. Uh, that's why like you have this massive peak, because here you have both the mid bass playing and the subwoofer, the front one. And from this we can see that like the tweeter response is not that bad. The mid-range is not that bad. Like if you cut everything like here below 400 hertz, like mids and tweets, they play very nice, and we see what we expect. We have a dip, which is the reflection from the window, which was there and it is there, and we have a peak, a mountain on the upper mid-range, and it's expected because of the locations. Now this dip, this massive dip, I think, it's just my theory, that it is drivers not totally out of phase, but like maybe like 90-degree out of phase due to being different distances from each other. Because you remember, I didn't put any I cannot time align mid bass to the mid range, and this is kind of maybe the crossover region. So let me show you what the actual drivers do, because I took near field, but these are near field measurements, so they're not from the driver's seat, because I cannot disconnect drivers one by one because the passive crossover is not going to work. So where do we have woofer? There we go. So they are on higher level because it's near field. So the woofer, this is crossed at close to 80 hertz. I just put a crossover on the amplifier, which is just eyeballed it. So we have woofer with no tab and woofer with that tab that you can adjust. So you can choose a slope between 6 dB and 12 dB. And this is exactly the same as I kind of measured when I tested the passive crossovers in my previous video. So the biggest difference is like at the top end above 2K, which takes down this, but like for the region that I'm using them, like in this region, it doesn't do anything, because if you know, the drivers from the kicks, they play up to like 200, and then the acoustical response goes down just like that. So basically this doesn't affect at all. And we can see now that this mid bass driver plays all the way up to like more than 1K, all the way up to 1.5K something. So it's crossed quite high in a two-way, in a passive three-way. Now let's have a look at the mid-range. So this is mid-range with a tab and mid-range with no tab. So when you remove the tab, it basically reduces the mid-range by close to 3 dB, something like that. Weirdly, it doesn't reduce the bottom end, just the middle. So it just takes off of some of the mid-range. And we see, if we overlap woofer with, where's the woofer, with mid-range, they overlap in quite a large area. So you would expect that this is gonna have, like, if they sum correctly, it's gonna sum into a like big mountain. But if they're out of time, there's gonna be a hole. And this is exactly what I have here, where I have my hole right in the middle, because they're not in time. If I would if I could cross like these with normal slopes, then I wouldn't have this issue. But because they're overlapping, they're basically canceling each other out. just because they have massive overlap. And like, this is kind of surprise for me, because you would think that, like, even if it's passive three-way, they would have less overlap, but they have so much overlap. It's so surprising. So mid-range and tweeter. So we have, on the tweeter, we have the tab that goes three ways. It has plus 3 dB, it has 0 dB, and it has minus 3 dB. And we have what we expect is just attenuated level. And as I mentioned in that video, that it doesn't change like the crossover frequency, but it changes the actual level, because it has a resistor and a cap as well, different cap for different resistance. So it just changes, attenuates the level by 3 dB, and we see it very nicely. What's surprising is that this tweeter, it looks like a very shallow slope. So like, if you take with the mid-range, let's say this one with no tab, you can see that again there's massive overlap in the crossover region. So you can expect there's going to be a lot of phase issues, where it's going to be like uh, dips or peaks. Okay, then, so this is the total response. Then I measured everything separately. So I measured the subwoofer with no crossovers. So it's like full range, because this is in my central console, so it plays all the way. And then I measured left and right individually with no crossovers. So the left one, it plays down to like 50 something, which is nice. And then the right one, since it's at a slightly different location, uh, it doesn't have this bottom end, and basically you have this mountain peak. And when I tuned any mid bass like in this location, I always had to tone this down, this peak with EQ, just bring it down to match the level. But remember, I don't have any EQ. I'm tuning a passive, so I have nothing. So this is individually left and right, and we can see here between like 250 and 400 these massive holes. And again, this is, I think, is just because you have distance between mid-range and mid-woofer, and there's no time alignment, so they're like out of phase by some degree, maybe 90, 70, 120 degrees, whatever, because it's not a full cancellation. Okay, so this so this is the whole all system. After, what did I do? I don't actually remember. But what I did next, I think I flipped the sub. No, I don't remember. Here, I flipped the mid-range, because I thought like, you have this dip and you have this dip. So if I would flip the mid-range, like the polarity of the mid-range on one side, then these are gonna, so this is the left one. Where is it? Left one. Left side. I thought if I'm gonna flip it, maybe these gonna fill in. So I flip the mid-range only, and you can see this is a full cancellation, which is a much bigger hole, and this indicates that it's not out of phase like 180 degrees, but it's by some degree. And we have a cancellation here as well, much higher. So I had to flip the mid-woofer polarity back. Then I applied some crossovers on the amplifier with the actual dial, and I just eyeballed it at 80. So this is just brought this one. And for the right side, right XO, it brought like this. So just cut the bottom end. And we have left and right individually with the crossover only. Then I started to play with the tabs. Oh, and the subwoofer as well. So where is it? This is subwoofer with no crossover. And then again, I eyeballed it something like 60 hertz or something on the amplifier. So it cut like all of this down. So I have this, and this to work with, left, right, and the subwoofer. Okay, so then I started to play with the tabs. So left side, the woofer with tab or with no tab. No, sorry. Yeah, so now I know. So what I did is, this is left side and left side. I just tried to remove the tab from the woofer just to see how the response changed. And it didn't change on the left side at all, just because, as I mentioned, my woofer falls down here, like acoustically. So since the tab changes the response like it after 1K all the way there, it doesn't affect anything. However, on the right side, my woofer plays higher. So removing that tab, having a different slope, affects the response here a tiny bit. Okay, so this. Then I tested all one by one. And what I did, yeah. So left one, yeah. I'm gonna change the color very quickly because it's difficult to differentiate. Let's put something darker, not like this. So what I did on the left side, because you can see the left side, the tweeter is like this, and the mid-range is a bit hot because of that natural boost. So I know that I need to remove this mid-range. And I figured out that these tabs, if I remove that tab, the mid-range goes down by 3 dB. So I remove that tab, and I reduce the mid-range by 3 dB, just like that, on the left side. On the right side, I did exactly the same as well, just remove that, because on the right side you can see that the mid-range is hot in here as well, especially this area. So I remove that as well. So these are the tabs that I changed. And after that, I have left and right, something like this. And then you can see that on the right side, the tweeter level is higher. Again, different colors. Oh my God. REW has so many colors and it chooses to give me similar. Okay, there we go. So here is kind of from like 100 hertz. This is kind of similar, Here is a big difference. Here is similar. And here you can see that on the right side, the green one, the tweet level is a bit high. So we know from psychoacoustics that frequencies, higher frequencies, like above 1K, 2K, and above, like all of this area specifically, you locate the sound by level. So, and this is exactly what I noticed when I just played the set like fresh with no adjustments whatsoever, and I had the same issue between left and right. So I noticed that like if you put delay on one group of speakers to bring them like in the center, like you have the bass kind of in the center, the mid-range in the center, but the high frequencies, they pull to one side, and they pull to one side because on the right side there's more level and it was pulling to the right. So like I had all the kind of almost everything in the center. However, the high frequencies were like right center, because the right side, because of this level, it was pulling up. So I know that I need to reduce the level of the right tweet, and this is exactly what I did. So I switched the tab of the tweet on the right side from plus 3 dB to 0 dB, and basically it's like this. So it brought the tweeter level down by 3 dB. And now if I compare left and right, it's much better. We have some discrepancy here at the very top end, but like at these high frequencies, it's just harmonics. You don't have like fundamental notes, so it's not gonna pull that much. But this area between like 2 and 6K, it looks like very kind of similar, and the rest is similar as well. So did this, and then the sum, left plus right, and again this sum is with no time alignment, but you can see that it does sum. Now for this I'm going to apply some smoothing just to see it better because it's a bit messy. 1/3. There we go. So we have at the bottom two individual traces, left and right, and at the top we have the sum. So you can see that it sums everywhere, even without the time alignment, which is great. Now, remember when I said that I will treat this my DSP as a head unit? So basically, head units have three controls: for the bass, for the mid-range, and for the treble. So from this I can see with 1/6 smoothing that like my tweeter is kind of okay. It has this peak at 12K, but you can't do anything about it. However, I have still in the mid-range area, I still have this mountain and a mountain on the mid bass. So now I know that the mid bass I can play with a crossover and just basically just remove it. But with the mid range, I cannot do anything unless I use that potentially available tone control. And what I did, I used one band of EQ on both sides, and that EQ was at 700 hertz, which is like, I would imagine something like mid-range area. I don't know exactly where the tone control is. It might be like 400 hertz, maybe like higher. I don't know. I chose 700 because if I cheated a bit. So I took the frequency that kind of beneficial for me. So I took this and I brought both sides down by 3 dB with a Q, the lowest Q, which was like 0.4, which is like almost a full octave. And basically what it did, again, smoothing. Yeah, so what it did, it brought this mid-range down without affecting too much the mid-bass and the tweeter area. So basically tone control with tone control, just bring this down. And I have this, which now looks better, much better. The mid-range is still high, but not as high. And then I was playing with a subwoofer because now the problem is like this area, like at like between 100 and 150. This is just too much. It's way too much because from this I have more than plus 10 dB here. So I need to reduce this area. In order to reduce this area, what I can do is I can widen the gap uh, between the subwoofer and the mid bass by changing the slope, the crossover frequency. I cannot change the slope, but I can change the frequency. So original, this one that I eyeballed it, crossover for the subwoofer, it was like this. So again, I went to the back to the amplifier, I eyeballed it again and decreased it. So it was like below 60 hertz probably. I'm not sure. I didn't actually look at the dial. I just turned it down a bit. So I turned it down. And then for the front, so left was right, and this one. Yeah. So I upped the crossover frequency for the whole three-way, and I ended up something on the dial, something at 120 hertz. So it's quite high, but you can see that it removes this whole mountain from the bottom. Let me just remove this. Yeah, so it removes this whole mountain, and basically when they sum, I have something like this instead of this. So let me put again. See, so basically with separating the crossovers, this one ended up like 55 and this 120. I made a gap which allowed me to have like better slopes and less overlapping between these drivers. And then this level just went down. So if I remove this and the subwoofer, again, apply the smoothing just for fun. So yeah, so with the crossovers, I managed to remove all of this mountain, like 5 dB of this. And now it looks a bit better. However, I still need some bass. Ooh, please don't die on me. So what I did, I upped the gain on the amplifier on the channel 3-4, which is bridged for the subwoofer. It's just on the rear channels. And I upped the gain and basically increased this like this. And it ended up something like this. And then I noticed that one side was out of phase from the other side. I don't know how that happened. How much time do I have? 8 minutes. Oh my god. So basically I flipped one side on the passive crossover. It didn't change much. It changed just a tiny bit. But basically I ended up with something like this, the final curve, which is, I think it's not bad. Yeah, so I'm gonna end up here with a laptop and I'm gonna jump into the phone. So the laptop is still alive. When the light goes dark, then you know that the laptop died. Yeah, so it's kind of night. It's 10:30 in the evening. Everybody is asleep, and I just do my thing. So my impressions: I listen to music, and I am so surprised how good it sounds. Like before doing this, because this is like an eye opener for me, an experiment. So before doing this, I didn't imagine that a passive system can sound so good. It's really really good. So the only issue that I have now is because I cannot time align subwoofer with the whole front end. So the sub is where the sub is basically it's not on the front of the dash because it's not time aligned. So it does some, everything is fine, like I have the level and everything, but when the sub hits, you can hear that it's coming actually from the central console and not from the front of the dash. So this is the main like drawback. And if you would have a subwoofer like in the very back in the boot, probably it would be much worse. So like without time alignment, to have an upfront sub is kind of impossible. However, the left and right, the imaging is surprisingly good. It's like it's not pinpoint accurate, but it's very, very accurate. Like I want to say, I'm not going to say in degrees, but it's like, it's very, very good. Very good. Tonality could be better, especially like in the lower mid range, in the upper mid bass region where I actually have that dip, but with the passives you cannot do anything about it. But in general, I really really like how it sounds like. What I noticed, one thing is when one side mid bass was playing a bit lower than the other side, I was playing with the sine tones, and what I noticed, there's a lot of bleed between the drivers. So like if I play like 60 hertz uh, sine tone to test the mid bass driver, I can hear like hiss and noise coming from the mid range and the tweeter. So I think it's the passive crossover that actually like transmits the noise. So when you have like crosstalk between the channels, so it's like crosstalk between the actual drivers in a three-way when you have a passive. But if you have some adjustability on the passive crossovers like tabs or like knobs or switches or whatever, it could work. The other thing that I would say, if you have passive crossover or planning to have passive crossovers, don't put the mid-range in the dash, have it in A pillars next to the tweeter, so you'd have a better phase relationship between the drivers, and you wouldn't have that boost in the lower mid-range when I try to reduce it like at 700 hertz, because that fact that putting mid-range in the dash gives that extra boost, and with passives you cannot remove it. So unless you, maybe if you have like tone controls on the whatever, you can, but uh don't put it in the dash, put it in the A pillars. And between mid bass and mid range, yeah, that's an issue. How to solve it? You cannot solve it. It's just, it is what it is. So for now, this tune that I have now, I'm gonna have it for a week. I'm gonna listen to it. Uh, but I like how it sounds like, because I want to get used to the sound as well. So I got to used to of playing literally just mid-range and tweeters for a week, but now I want to experience the whole thing. And this front Dayton sub, it's a beast. It goes down to like 30, 20 hertz from this small box, and it plays all of it. Of course, it does rattle things. It does rattle the central console, but because I was playing it down to like 40, 45 before, and I let the IB sub take over, but now it's playing all the way down with no subsonic. It's a beast of a sub. But yeah, this was a very good experience for me. I hope that maybe you learned something, and if you have a fully passive system, if you don't have a DSP, if you cannot afford it, if you're planning to buy it but don't have it yet, I hope that this video helped you somewhat. And for those that run fully active systems, it might be just a bit educational and stuff, I don't know, but I like it. I like how it sounds like. I like the whole journey through this. It took me like 2.5 hours to do this, and I was jumping in and out of the car just to go to the back to change the switches, to change the gears and everything. I went out of the car like maybe 20-30 times, just because like you cannot do anything from here, you have to go all the way back. But yeah, that was fun. So cool. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.